Can you remember the last Eskom push notification you received? Probably not, and if you do, chances are it either concerned water issues or told you the number of days without load shedding. That's because Eskom hasn't implemented rolling blackouts since the 26th of March. At the time of recording, South Africans were spending their 164th consecutive day without having to worry about when to cook, when to do the laundry, and whether the alarm would work. And it seems the good times are here to last. At the end of August, Eskom told the country it had made it through winter fine and that it was ready to deliver a mostly load-shedding free summer. So, what changes at the power utility allowed for such a turn of events? And importantly, are we out of the woods yet when it comes to electricity supply? I'm Julien Trévian, delighted to be back. You're watching Johannesburg Journal.
My fellow South Africans,
take note of what is happening in South Africa.
The date for the demise of the white minority regime has been determined.
Listen properly.
It's over. It's a fourth Rugby World Cup for South Africa.
With what we have gone through, we can't allow this, Madam Speaker.
Well, let me tell you something.
The ANC is falling even further into the ground.
You are not showing the comrades a way to eat.
Shut up! Shut up!
I want to hear a pin drop.
Our electricity system remains vulnerable and we cannot yet rule out the possibility of further load shedding. That's the message President Ramaphosa addressed to South Africans last July, cautiously celebrating 100 days without rolling blackouts. In his weekly newsletter, the President suggested that SA's power woes could soon be over thanks to his government's action on the electricity front. These measures include the removal of licensing thresholds for new independent generation projects in 2022 against the Minister of Energy Gwede Mantashe's advice, tax incentives for rooftop solar in 2023, although these ended in February 2024 for households and will in 2025 for businesses, and the opening of more bid windows for renewables. Changes have also taken place at Eskom as part of the Generation Operational Recovery Plan of 2023.
As we sit here today, we are on 152 days without load shedding. When we began this journey, we had a number of speculators, in terms of what would have been behind it. We took a view at a time and continue to hold that view. There's nothing dramatic about what you are seeing. All of this is a convergence of calculated moves, deliberate interventions.
Calculated moves and deliberate interventions by renewed management which have led to a shift in culture at the utility. Better maintenance, monetary incentives, improved staff morale, and ultimately greater yield at most of its plants. An improvement reflected in the company's energy availability factor, which tells how much electricity is being produced out of the maximum theoretical yield of the entire fleet of power plants. After dropping from 85% in 2011 to the low 50s at its worst in 2023, the EAF has begun to rise again thanks to reduced unplanned outages. It hit 67% this year, and Eskom aims for 70% and the end of load shedding by March 2025, thanks to an additional 2,500 megawatts from the Koeberg, Kusile and Medupi plants. In the meanwhile, this summer could be the first without load shedding in many years, provided that Eskom managed to limit breakdowns to 13,000 megawatts. For comparison, winter 2024 saw an average of 12,400, which leaves room for optimism. Contagious optimism. Last July, ArcelorMittal went back on its decision to close its Newcastle and Vereniging operations. The Reserve Bank has published an upward revision of its economic growth provisions for 2024 and 2025 at the beginning of September. But ending load shedding is not the end of Eskom's mission.
For us, ending load shedding is not our destination. Our destination goes way beyond that. Ending load shedding is the first step that is necessary, but we need to really be building an organization that will live for the next 100 years, an organization that is able to pivot into the new and reformed electricity industry, and that remains a key player as it has been in the last 100 years.
Let's talk about two of the most pressing issues, the open electricity market and new nuclear. This August, President Ramaphosa signed the Electricity Regulation Amendment Act into law, marking the end of Eskom as we know it. He promised that the act will lead to a long-term energy security, a more competitive energy system, more rapid uptake of renewable energy sources, and ultimately lower prices for all South Africans. This major reform of the electricity market, the first since 1998, will see the unbundling of Eskom into separate generation, distribution and transmission entities. A transmission system operator will be created within the next 5 years to operate the market, balancing power supply and demand, and purchasing electricity from independent power producers and Eskom. Now, as South Africa gets closer to ending load shedding, it must think about its power supply for the future. The country's fleet of coal-fired plants is aging, and the shift to more sustainable power sources is urgent. In January 2024, the Minister of Electricity, Josiencho Ramaropa, gazetted the procurement of 2,500 megawatts of nuclear power after meeting Nersa's requirements at the end of 2023. The process was, however, challenged by several environmental organizations such as EarthLife Africa, which led to Ramaropa withdrawing his gazette, much to their surprise. I agree with EarthLife Africa, he said in August, that Nersa should have subjected that process to a public participation process. The last thing we want is to do a major build program on the back of suspicion that the department and government is hiding something from the public. I think that it is proper that we are able to extend an opportunity to these parties and other parties to evaluate, examine, critique and respond to our report, he added. Once a stronghold for corruption, I find it amazing that procurement for Eskom is now becoming a model of accountability. The minister, however, warned that nuclear is part of the mix, nuclear is part of the future, nuclear is government policy, so it will happen. Now here's something that could happen. Millions of prepaid electricity meters going dark before the end of the year. After the 24th of November, STS meters will no longer accept tokens due to limitations in their code. That means the 11 million households and businesses reliant on this system won't be able to buy electricity at all unless their device is updated. Eskom and municipalities across the country only started updating meters last year, a decade after finding out about the issue. At the time of recording, 42% of Eskom's 7 million meters and 16% of municipalities' 4 million still hadn't been updated. That's more than 3.5 million in total, including mine, with less than 80 days before the deadline. The process is easy and doesn't necessarily require a team to be dispatched. In fact, many municipalities have chosen to send an update code for people to dial in themselves when buying new tokens. But too many South Africans are at risk, and a number of them could choose to bypass their meter for lack of better option, adding to the already numerous illegal connections. Many households and businesses are indeed choosing to connect unlawfully to the grid, costing Eskom some 7 billion rands every year in Gauteng alone. And whilst that's not always the case, one reason for this is the price of electricity bills. Between 2007 and 2022, electricity tariffs have gone up by 653%, whilst inflation in South Africa was only 129%, a massive difference due to an error by SA's energy regulator. That's in Nhlanhla Gumede's opinion. The head of electricity regulation at Nersa told the Sunday Times he felt they were wrongly interpreting the law since the early noughties. We have been using an inappropriate pricing methodology which is not founded in the Electricity Regulation Act of 2001. Instead, he argues that Nersa has been following the repealed 1987 Eskom Act, thus considering the utilities revenue rather than a cost of supply, to the detriment of consumers. The objective of the Energy Regulation Act, Gumede said, is to balance the interests of Eskom, consumers and the supply industry. I don't think we have done this. The organization denies any wrongdoing and has made clear that Gumede was speaking in his own name, but the Minister of Electricity is not convinced. He asked for a review of Nersa's methodology and argued that he did not believe the regulator capable of dealing with SA's future open electricity market. This story comes as a 36 to 44% increase in electricity tariffs is in the pipeline, one that could hurt already cash-strapped South Africans and be unlawful if Nhlanhla Gumede is to be believed. The Democratic Alliance and AfriForum have already opposed Eskom's proposal. After years of load shedding, it finally feels like South Africans could be out of the woods. We're 5 months after the last rolling blackouts, and it seems the good times are here to last. However, the national government, municipalities and Eskom are facing challenges that could threaten our energy security and the affordability of an essential service. We are still dealing with past leaders' lack of forecast, which could mean thousands, if not millions of South Africans finding themselves in the dark in the next months or years. But our current leaders are making progress. Perhaps not as fast as we would like, but we'll get there sometime. This takes us to the end of this explainer. Thank you for watching. You can support Johannesburg Journal by subscribing and by liking, commenting and sharing this video. Until next time, Salagatli.